Hello and welcome to Maths by SAS. This is my first lesson of D4 chapter number 3 exercise 3C, that is about the multiplication law of probability and conditional probability. Before going to the exercise, it's really important to understand that what is the multiplication law of probabilities and what is conditional probability and when and how to apply the multiplication law of probability and how to identify the situations which are related to multiplication law of probabilities. So the basic question that comes in the mind to apply the multiplication law of probability is that what are dependent and independent events? How will you find it out whether the events are dependent or independent? So let's first discuss the concept of dependent events. Two events A and B are said to be dependent events if occurrence of one event affects the occurrence of other. So it means that when the occurrence of one event is affecting the occurrence of other event, then those two events are dependent events. And what are the independent events? The two or more events are said to be independent events if the occurrence or non-occurrence of one of the events does not affect the occurrence or non-occurrence of other event. So I hope if these 2 points are clear, then you can easily identify that this is a situation of dependent events or independent events. Let's try to understand the idea of dependent and independent events with the help of the example. A bag contains 4 red, 3 black and 3 white counters. What is the probability of getting a red counter 2 times in a row? Red counter 2 times in a row. Okay, look, here we have a bag and it is containing 1, 2, 3 and 4 red counters, 3 black counters and 3 white counters, and we have to find the probability of picking up of red counter twice in a row. Okay, now you can see that there can be 2 situations here. That in case 1, it can happen that when we select the first red counter, after writing the chances of that red counter, we put that red counter back in the bag. Now what will happen when we'll be picking up the next red counter? The number of red counters will remain same as they were in the beginning, and the total number of counters or total number of objects will also be same like they were in the beginning. So when we put the first counter back, that will be the situation of with replacement. And in this case you can see that in the beginning total counters were 10. After recording the chances of the first red counter, we are putting that red counter back. The sample space does not decrease. So in this case, the probability that you will be getting for 2 counters, red counters in a row, will be the choices of first red counter times the chances for the second red counter, that is 4 by 10 multiplied by 4 by 10, or that can reduce to 2 by 5 times 2 by 5, or 4 by 25. For the case of independent events, you can take the idea of flipping of a coin or the rolling of a single die. Now case 2, what can happen in case 2? That can be the case that when we are picking up the first counter from the bag and we are not putting that red counter back in the bag, so what will happen that when we'll be picking up the first red counter, the choices of the red counter will be from the 4 out of the total, which is 10. And when we have selected this red counter with us and we are not putting it back, suppose this red counter is excluded. Okay, now there will be 3 red counters in the bag and the total will also be 1 less than the original total. So in this case you can see that when the situation is without replacement, here the key word is without replacement, that we are not putting that counter back or that object back. Okay, the choices of the next object will be affected by the choices of the previous object. So in this case, the choices of the first red counter will be 4 by 10, but as we are not putting that red counter back, so when we'll be picking up the second red counter, there are 3 red counters only with us. So the choices for the red counter will be 3 by 9. So it can reduce to 2 by 5 times 3 by 9 or 6 by 45. I hope you are clear about that how to identify dependent and independent events, and what will happen to sample space in case of independent events, and what will happen to the sample space in case of dependent events, and what are the keywords that will be helping you in understanding the questions from the exercise and from the paper. That the term with replacement will be telling you that this is the case of independent events, and without replacement will be telling us about the dependent events. And now moving to the conditional probability, let's understand what is the conditional probability. First of all, it's really important to understand that what is the meaning of term condition or conditional, and how to understand conditional probability. Condition or conditional means a word, a clause or sentence that shows that something is true and happens only if something else is true or happens. So the other way of understanding of the word condition or conditional is the dependent. So what is conditional probability? The probability of something given that something else has occurred or happened. This is the conditional probability. And in order to apply and solve the situations of conditional probability, we have to apply the multiplication rule for the probabilities. And again, if you recall my previous lesson, we can see that we can have 2 types of situations. One are the independent events and one are the dependent events. In case of independent events, you have to find the probability of independent events by using the formula that probability of A intersection B will be equal to probability of A multiplied by probability of B, and the key word is probability of A and B. And for dependent events, probability of A intersection B will be equal to probability of A multiplied by probability of B upon A, because in case of dependent events there will be something which is will be common in both of the events, so we have to take care of that. Now coming to the question that how to identify the question of conditional probability. In case of the questions of the conditional probability, we will have the single experiment, and that single experiment will be divided into events, event A and event B, and the language that will be written in the question will be that we have to find the probability of event A provided event B has already occurred. These are the key terms that you have to keep in your mind, and the words that will be helping us in identification of the questions of conditional probability and the multiplication law of probability are that some event has occurred or known to us or seen, given or visited. I hope you are really clear about that what are the independent and dependent events, and what will happen to the sample space in case of independent events and dependent events, and what is the formula for the multiplication rule of probability for independent and dependent events, and how to identify the questions of conditional probability. Keeping these all points in your mind, let's move to the exercise, okay, and let's apply these all terms on the exercise so that the learning becomes easy for us. Please watch my lessons, like, share and subscribe the channel, and press bell icon to get the notification of every lesson in time. Thank you very much.